Does that invalidate the sacrament? Answer, no. Is it proper, good order, and decency? No. That's why we have laws of ministry. The Lord's Supper, including baptism, folks, are such critical sacraments. We want no doubt in a person's mind that it was done correctly. That's why the church, God has ordered the church, God through the church, appoints, calls men to serve in the office of the holy ministry with the responsibility that the sacraments be properly administered and that the gospel be purely preached. Now, I might say, I might say that the Augsburg Confession, I go back and forth on this thing, seems to suggest Article 14, no one shall publicly preach, teach, or administer the sacrament without a regular right call. Which would suggest that probably we should have just pastors giving out the sacrament entirely. Now, in our congregation, we do have laymen appointed by the pastors, trained by the pastors to assist. I'm not sure that would have been done at the Reformation. I don't know the history. I don't think so. I think they would have had pastors do it. Here, I don't know, at least we have the pastor administering the sacrament in the sense of pronouncing the words of institution and giving out the host, which shows that he is the one in charge of the sacrament. By the way, that was something I had to change here. Some of you older folks here may remember, because they were a long time, years ago, it was always the pastor who distributed the cup. And the elder distributed the host, which was backwards, because the one distributing the host is the one who administered the sacrament. He is the one who is in charge of the sacrament. And it's proper that the chief preacher of the day, in our case, is the guy wearing the chasuble, so you know who's doing it. He's the one who distributes the host. And the assistants distribute the cup. If I had my brothers, we wouldn't have, with all due respect to our deacons, who do a very good job. They're trained well, they take it very seriously. But frankly, if I had a smaller congregation, I'd just have the pastors do it themselves. Although here you can imagine a service would be 2 hours long who did that, which, so what? Everybody's saying, I don't know if I answered your question. Was I talking around your question? Did I answer?
Because where I was at one time, anybody gave them, they could give the bread, completely dressed both sides, so be a woman or a man or anything. And then got to the point that the one didn't even know what to say. And this is something wrong here, and I don't know what's going on.
And you're absolutely right. Was it a Lutheran church?
Yes, it was.
Missouri Synod?
No, it wasn't.
You're going to say Missouri Synod.
Yes, well, that's why I couldn't take them along. Everything was just, we didn't even practice. We had one standing at the altar. We were so much in, I like that idea of that.
Well, and I got to just comment on that too, because we're living in a very sensitive time today. I think we make a big mistake, frankly, and this probably brings that same issue of having deacons assist the sacrament, where we let men assist the pastor up in front and not the women. Because what issue does that raise? Well, yeah. I mean, the problem, though, is that what makes a man qualified to be out there representing God to the people? Not that he's a man. It's that he has the call to do it by God through the church. And not only can women, according to the Bible, not represent the bridegroom to the holy bride, you know what I'm talking about, that is, be pastors and priests, men can't do it either. You don't have the call from the church or God through the church to do it. You understand? And that's why I am not enamored at all by the idea of having laymen up there reading scriptural lessons, assisting with the liturgy, and doing stuff. It sends the wrong signal, especially to women, that somehow they're a little bit inferior to men. This is not the message to send out, right? The only reason I'm up there, Pastor Johnson, is that God through the church has called and appointed us to be public ministers of the Word. No one shall publicly preach, teach. By the way, there's teaching going on when you read the scriptural lessons. Correct or not? Of course there is. How you read it, the emphasis you put on certain words, etc. Of course there's teaching going on. It's not a minor thing. How the liturgy is conducted. Of course there's teaching going on. How do you, if we conducted the liturgy in a very sloppy way and kind of, I'll sit up there dozing off half the time during the prayers, that sends a loud message to people. How we conduct ourselves up there is very critical. How we dress, how tone of voice, our inflection, our facial expressions. All this stuff goes into communication, which is teaching. Yeah. Well, that's not in the sense where the whole congregation is invited into that thing. There's some gray area. Now, I'll say right now that actually Missouri Synod, I think I mentioned this before, we never had Sunday schools originally. That came out of Methodist tradition, I've read. Because the Lutheran Church, what did we have? Missouri Synod. Parochial schools. That's what we had. We had Christian schools. And by the way, those schools were always staff interested here at Point Pat. Those, what did I say? Did I say something? No. Don't listen to him. Missouri Synod, you know, up until World War I, had only male parochial school teachers. And the college at River Forest, Concordia Teachers College, was actually originally called Concordia Teachers Seminary. And these were men who were trained to teach in our Christian day schools. And if they didn't, the pastor did. My mother was instructed by her pastor in Illinois. They didn't have a teacher. They had a school that he did all the teaching too. Pastor did. And that's how the Missouri Synod handled it. After World War I, of course, so many men were gone to Europe fighting. You know, the church had all these schools. We had a lot more schools in those days. In fact, the Missouri Synod, I understand too, no congregation was admitted into the Missouri Synod, or at least they had a tough time getting in, which didn't have a parochial school. That's why congregations like ours here, dating back to the days of Civil War, has a school. And that's the way it was done. We didn't have Sunday schools. So there you go. And they had what they called in the Sunday morning service, it was called a, what's the German, Christenlernen, I think it was called Christenlernen, where the pastor would preach his sermon, and then did your father do that, Vivian? Then he'd have a little catechism lesson for the kids. I'm sure he probably did that back in the early days of his ministry. It wasn't a little children's sermon. It was basically a catechism lesson. And it was what Sunday school based. The pastor did. Services were 2 hours long in those days. That's how it's done. So anyway, things have changed a lot. You know, I'm not going to say we're going to go back to 1800s today. We can't do that. But you know, we have to be careful as we adapt to the current situation. We try to maintain proper order and decency as much as is possible. In our congregation here, we can't have just Pastor Johnson and me distribute communion. It would take forever, as you can imagine. So we do the next best thing. We don't just, who would like to help us today? Anybody else? We don't do that. We designate somebody. We train them. We gown them up so people know that they're not just arbitrarily pulled out of the congregation somewhere. And at least we have them distribute the cup, not the host.
You have to wear a gown.
No. But it's nice. The purpose of the gown is to cover over your street clothes so that people don't see you, they see your office. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like a police officer wearing his uniform, you're not supposed to see his face, you see a badge. He has authority to arrest you, not because of who he is, but because of what he is. That's why a pastor gives the church for some kind of clergy guard. Okay, that's another question on this topic, very important topic. Okay, let's go to Joseph. 15 minutes. oh, I got to mention one other thing. I'm sorry. Somebody called me from from Michigan. They're coming next Sunday. She wants to know if any of her relatives are still here. She begged us to find out. We said we don't do things like that. Her daughter wrote me back, was very upset with us that we wouldn't help her poor mother out, who's in her 70s, and bringing her sister and brother here to find a relative. So I got to read these names. If any of you know any of these people, please contact me or Penny Wells, and we'll tell them next week. They wanted to get up in the church service next Sunday and make a speech about this. So I said, I don't think we do that. Anyway, here's the name. The name is Zick. August and Johanna Zick. He is buried back there, allegedly, in our cemetery. They left Osseo Maple Grove in 1909. Anybody here alive? Also, they said people with the name Teskey would also be relatives. Does that ring a bell? Did you hear that name?